Many years ago, I attended a teaching, a Buddhist teaching, and after the teaching, the audience was given the opportunity for having a Q&A with the master, and people asked various questions pertaining to practice. And one girl, she asked a very interesting question, where she presented a particular problem she was having. She said to the master, "What does one do when one hates oneself?" And I don't recall what the master's reply was. And I often thought about that question, what was her meaning? She was obviously a Dharma practitioner, very smart, and been practicing for many years. And she asked a question like that. What is one to do if one hates oneself? A few days ago, while meditating, that question surfaced in my mind along with an answer. And because for me it seemed very contradictory for a Buddhist practitioner to hate themselves. She was a Buddhist practitioner. And Buddhist practitioners are generally happy and able to bear the burden of themselves, so to speak, in terms of overcoming obstacles and so forth. And for me, the question seemed very strange. Yeah, Buddhist practice is very difficult, but that's not what she was talking about. She was talking about hating herself. To me, that question indicates that perhaps what was really going on is she wasn't really practicing as she had vowed or intended to do. This is very probable, and I have seen it too. If one's practice is consistent and every day, then generally, there's good days and bad days, but generally a Buddhist practitioner is pretty even-keeled. There's no highs or lows, so to speak. You're just moving along on the path according to the ability and the effort one puts into it, and has, the abilities one has, and the effort one puts forth. And that determines how far we move along and how fast we move along. So, we get out of practice what we put in, basically. But it's not about moving forward quickly or having any attainment, so to speak. What practice is really about is enjoying the path. And the way to enjoy the path is to practice every day. Whether it's a little or a lot, that's up to each individual to decide, but every day we follow our intention to practice as we have agreed with ourselves to practice, how we have intended to practice and kind of practice we have decided upon and so forth. So why is this girl unhappy? Why does she hate herself? Well, perhaps it's because she's not practicing in accordance with her intention, like what she had resolved her practice should entail. which is a certain amount of hours, a certain amount of time, and every day. So if you intend to do something, especially Dharma practice, and you follow through, you may not be on top of the world all the time, but you're doing okay. But if over a long period of time you start out practicing diligently every day, according to one's intention, and one keeps this up for a while, months or even years, and then one starts maybe getting a little discouraged. One thinks one's not getting as far along as one should be given the effort one's put forth and the time one's put forth. There's various reasons. Also, life circumstances can change. One gets a different job. One moves into a different area. And then these are used as, a pretext for dropping off of consistency in one's practice, daily practice. One says to oneself, oh, I moved, I got a new job, I got married, and all these things. And basically uses that as an excuse to slack off in one's practice, when the real reason is one simply not getting anywhere. One feels discouraged, and instead of admitting to oneself one is discouraged, one blames the practice and says, well, it's not working, so I'm going to cut down a little bit on my practice time. This is very common, but it shouldn't be. People should know better. So in the case of this girl, what I believe probably happened is she was a good practitioner, practiced for a few years, and then started, for various reasons, not following her intention. So when you don't follow your intention, then you start that self that inside of you that really cares about you start saying, well, wait a second, what about me? Didn't we resolve that we would, meet the Buddha once or twice a day and have a meditation and connect with ourselves? And now we're only doing it a little bit. So it's kind of like this alter ego saying to us that we've kind of dropped the ball. And we identify with that alter ego that's telling us we dropped the ball, and we blame that alter ego for our misery. And that alter ego is not real. It's our own creation. We created it ourselves. No one else did it for us. That's who we are. That's, our self. You want to use the term self. We created it. And if we're miserable, it's because we haven't been true to that self. So it would have been nice if the Lama asked, the Tibetan master, asked her, well, have you shown up for yourself? Have you followed your resolve? And then she might have been able to see that probably she wasn't. And so that self that she isn't following, which is really who she is tapping her on the shoulder constantly, reminding her that she once had a practice going very strongly and very consistently, and she doesn't anymore. And that reminder makes her miserable, and it'll make her miserable as long as she doesn't show up for herself. Keep her promise to herself, which is kind of an alter self that we all create in various ways. In terms of Dharma practice, it's a self-image of a practitioner that has to live up to a certain ideal that we establish as our reference of who we are as a practitioner. So if we do show up for ourselves, then we are happy, moving along. But if we don't, then we're constantly dogged by this realization that we are not showing up for ourselves. And then we say, oh, I'm miserable. I hate myself. But what we're hating is the self that we created ourselves. And that self, in this case, was a good Dharma practitioner, and could be again. Maybe she is now, I don't know. But that's the problem that she faced, I would guess, is completely self-created and easily corrected. So to bring this all to a point and a close, whatever we resolve to do, however meager it is, at least do that much, whatever it is. And if it's to study a half hour a day, meditate a half hour a day, and reflect a half hour a day, whatever we decide upon, we should show up for ourselves and do that. That's how we build a personal practice and a personal identity in the process, because we start identifying with our practice. And as long as we identify with our practice and we are doing our practice, we will be happy. As soon as we stop practicing, we still identify with our practice, but since the practice is not going as it should, we become unhappy and we blame ourselves. And we have nothing to blame but ourselves for not following through. But we have to remember that we're the ones who created that self-image, that self to begin with. And so it's as simple as living up to our own personal ambitions, soteriological ambitions, and follow through. If we do that, we're okay. If we don't do that, we'll start hating ourselves and forget the fact is that we're hating ourselves because we're not living up to ourselves. And that's as simple as that. And if we understand that, then we won't make that mistake.